Oh, this is not going to be fun. You heard me talk about the good animated movies. Now let's talk about the bad. These are my bottom 5 animated movies of 2018. The ones that I liked the least. And keep in mind, some of these animated movies aren't completely terrible, but unfortunately they weren't as good as I wanted them to be, and I did have to fill up my list somehow. So unfortunately they ended up on my list. And keep in mind, this is all objective. If you like any of the animated movies on my list, that's fine. I sadly just couldn't get into these movies. Anyway, let's get started. These are my top 5 worst animated movies of 2018. Here we go. Number 5. Sgt Stubby, An American Hero. I won't lie when I say this is a movie that actually could have worked. I think the story behind this film is actually a rather fascinating one. But unfortunately though, this film feels more like a film you would watch in a US history class and not in a theater. It really comes off more as an after-school special in its look and feel because it just feels incredibly safe. And personally, I am not a big fan of movies that just play it safe. I'd rather see an animated movie take a risk and fail at it than just completely play it safe, which is something that I think a movie set during World War I shouldn't do. It really feels like the filmmakers were so scared of getting complaints from parents that they try to make the movie as safe as possible. For example, when a character in the movie gets wounded, you don't see any wound marks on him, not even a scratch. Also, the animation in this movie really didn't look very good, which is a shame considering the studio who made the animation also provided it for Captain Underpants. The film does have a good character relationship between Stubby and our main character Robert Conroy, but the film is just too safe and boring for my tastes. So overall, this isn't a bad movie, but I just can't recommend it. Number 4. Smallfoot. Oh man, this should have been a good movie. I really wanted to like Smallfoot. I mean, the film is made by Warner Brothers Animation and is written and directed by Carrie Kirkpatrick, who also wrote the screenplay for Chicken Run. Not to mention that the plot for this movie is really ingenious. It focuses on how Yetis see humans. They call them Smallfoots, and there's a group of Yetis trying to prove their existence. This feels something right out of a Chuck Jones cartoon. But sadly, it's anything but. The story in this movie just felt really predictable and really by the numbers overall that it was very hard for me to get invested in any of it. It does have some fun characters in it, like Migo and the Yeti Club that is trying to prove that Smallfoot exists, and I did like the animation at times, even though it was too similar to Hotel Transylvania. But some of the other characters like Percy really got under my skin, and I just didn't find some of the jokes in the film very funny. One of my biggest problems I do have with the movie though is that it was a musical even though it did not need to be. I would have forgiven it if the songs in the movie were good, but unfortunately they're not. They're pretty forgettable overall. The only song I remember, though not for the right reasons, was the one where Percy got on stage and started to sing random lyrics to Under Pressure to try to get back his girlfriend. Yeah, that was a pretty tough scene to sit through. So overall, I do think this is a fine film. It's definitely not terrible or anything, but with a premise like this, as well as an animation studio and a talented director behind it, I expected a lot more. Number 3. Sherlock Gnomes. Well, The Crimes of Grindelwald wasn't the only bad sequel Johnny Depp was in this year, but I'll give that film this. It has more reason to exist than Sherlock Gnomes does. This really is one of those animated movie sequels I have no idea why it exists. And if I'll be honest, I completely forgot about Romeo and Juliet until the first trailer of this movie arrived. And I'll just get this out of the way right now. The trailer for Sherlock Gnomes was terrible. It was so juvenile and filled with some of the worst jokes I've heard in a very long time that I was shocked that it even got approved. The good news was that most of the bad stuff you saw in the trailer was nowhere in the movie, but that still doesn't excuse the film. It still sucks. This film really doesn't even have a lot going for it anyway. The story is just pretty predictable and goes through every single twist and turn you can imagine. Most of the jokes are just about the fact that the characters are garden gnomes, and yeah, there's really not a lot you can go off of with that. And with the exception of Dr. Watson, who was mildly enjoyable, none of the characters were fun. Gnomeo and Juliet were dry and tiresome, and Sherlock Gnomes and Moriarty were incredibly annoying. This film easily lives up to being the worst animated movie sequel of the year, and I hope everything that they are not making a third one, because, yeah, the least we need is a third Gnomeo and Juliet. Number 2. Gnome Alone. If you have no idea what this movie is, then I am really happy for you. This was a film made by Vanguard Animation, the same studio that brought us films like Happily Never After and Space Chimps, as well as Peter Lipinoidis, the director of The Nut Job, and was initially supposed to be released in theaters. It ended up on Netflix instead, and I'm actually pretty happy it did because, oh wow, this movie is terrible. The film was about these two kids protecting this house from these weird round-like creatures known as trogs with the help of garden gnomes. Apparently 2018 was the year for animated movies with garden gnomes in them for some reason. And boy, was this film really uncreative. The tropes and cliches done in this movie are just the same tropes and cliches we have seen a million times before, and this film also had the tendency to really quote a lot of popular films like Lord of the Rings and Aliens, even though it had no reason to do so except for the fact that they're popular. Throw on some wildly uncreative animation, as well as characters that you really don't like, especially our lead, who is totally obsessed with her cell phone, and you get yourself a big recipe for disaster. I would have put this movie at my number 1 spot had another animated movie not ended itself up on Netflix, which I'm about to talk about right now. Here it is. My number 1 worst animated movie of 2018 is Duck, Duck, Goose. Oh, this movie. This movie. I remember sitting through the trailer of this movie before Lego Ninjago and thinking it would be bad, but I did not expect the movie to be this bad. This film is atrocious on every single level possible. Nothing about this movie works. This film includes the likes of annoying cliches and plot lines, jokes that will be dated in a few years, butt jokes, fart jokes, and puke jokes galore, characters that are annoying, a terrible villain, generic and bland animation, and throw on the secret ingredient of having one of the most craziest and messed up climaxes in an animated movie ever, and you got yourself a recipe for one of the worst animated movies of the 2010s. And I am not exaggerating on any of that. I hated this movie that much. This film was so painful to watch and so painful to write a review for that I never want to talk about it again. Duck, Duck, Goose. Worst animated movie of 2018. Goodbye. The end. I'm done. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really am pleased with the animated movies that we got in 2018 overall. We didn't get a lot of bad ones that I thought we would. It seriously was a huge improvement over the animated movies that we got in 2017, especially the bad ones. Anyway, I do hope that the animated movies that we get next year are also as awesome and amazing like the ones we did get in 2018, and I'm really excited to see what we have upcoming. And I'll just say this right now, you guys seriously are the best. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for making this an amazing year for me, and I hope I can continue to talk about animation in the future. If you want a full list for the animated movies I saw in 2018, there is a link in the description, and I guess I'll see you guys next year. Until then, this is the Animated Antic, and take care.